August 1944. The streets of Paris erupted. After 4 years of occupation, the City of Light was free. But this triumph, momentous and deeply symbolic, masked a profound and immediate instability. Beneath the cheers and celebrations, a complex struggle for authority had already begun. The euphoria of liberation, often recounted as a seamless story of unity, was, in reality, a fragile veneer. President Roosevelt, wary of General Charles de Gaulle's assertive nationalism, had deliberately refused to recognize his provisional government. This created an immediate political awkwardness for General Donald Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, who understood the imperative of French stability. On the ground, tensions flared between Allied commanders themselves. Major General Leonard Gero, the American military governor of Paris, harbored deep resentment towards General Philippe Leclerc. Leclerc, commander of the French 2nd Armored Division, had consistently acted independently during the advance, a source of ongoing friction. The very fabric of Parisian life was strained to breaking point. The City of Light had been reduced to candles, often bought on the black market, symbolic of a society grappling with disorder. Law and order had fractured. A chilling anecdote speaks of a suspect dragged from custody and beaten to death by a frenzied crowd. Within the venerable walls of Notre Dame itself, violent outbursts occurred, marring the solemnity of liberation. Ugly denunciations of alleged collaborators echoed through the streets. This chaos demanded immediate political leadership. On August 27, 1944, Eisenhower, accompanied by General Omar Bradley, made a supposedly informal visit to Paris. This visit, far from casual, was escorted by 2 armored cars and a jeep, later reinforced by the 38th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. Eisenhower's initial thought that everyone will be sleeping late, we can do it without any fuss, proved a stark miscalculation. During his visit, Eisenhower, defying Roosevelt's unstated wishes, met with de Gaulle. It was a pragmatic decision, recognizing the urgent need for a legitimate French government. De Gaulle, with his powerful declaration that the Republic has never ceased to exist, understood the symbolic power of public displays. He strategically requested a show of force, a parade of Allied troops through Paris, to solidify his nascent authority. He even asked for 15,000 uniforms for the resistance, highlighting their integration challenges and the logistical realities, including the shortage of small-sized uniforms, a poignant detail reflecting the average French male stature. Eisenhower, the consummate military statesman, pragmatically agreed to the parade, though notably, he himself remained absent. This concession was vital in establishing a fragile order in Paris. Yet these maneuvers fueled wider inter-allied friction. Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Tedder, Eisenhower's British deputy, voiced concern over negative British press coverage. Fleet Street accused Americans of trying to hog all the glory, a sentiment Tedder feared was sowing the seeds of a grave split between the Allies. The seamless, unified Allied advance, so often portrayed in post-war narratives, is challenged by these internal disputes. Eisenhower's decision to recognize de Gaulle, far from merely following orders, was an independent act of political pragmatism. The liberation of Paris, a moment of immense triumph, was thus immediately followed by a period of profound instability and complex political maneuvering. Its euphoria masked deep underlying tensions, foreshadowing future challenges in integrating resistance fighters and maintaining Allied cohesion. The symbolic victory in Paris was part of a broader, rapid Allied advance across France, fueling a widespread belief that the war in Europe was nearing its end. General George S. Toubring Wars, Patton's Third Army, having surged from Normandy in early August, had shattered German lines, creating an intoxicating momentum. By late August and early September 1944, the combined pressure of Allied successes in the West and the Red Army's advance towards Warsaw in the East led many, including both Allied and German leadership, to perceive an imminent German collapse. This period was marked by a dangerous illusion of imminent victory. The British War Cabinet, for planning purposes, even set December 31st as a target date for the war's end. Only Prime Minister Winston Churchill, alone among key leaders, remained wary of German determination. But this perceived collapse masked significant underlying realities. Germany had indeed suffered immense losses. 589,425 men on the Eastern Front, and 156,726 on the Western Front, in just 3 months. The psychological toll was evident in Hitler's headquarters, the Wolfskans in East Prussia, where the paranoia triggered by the 20th of July bomb plot manifested in an unusual array of security measures. Finland's defection, followed by Romania abandoning the Axis in August, further signalled a crumbling alliance. German withdrawal tactics were improvised, relying on desperate march groups and designating ports as fortresses against all hope. Yet, to assume the West Front is finished was a profound miscalculation. Despite the internal chaos, the German military demonstrated a capacity for tactical regrouping and defense. The narrative of an invincible Wehrmacht, so prevalent in 1940, was now confronted by overwhelming American mechanized power. However, their resilience was consistently underestimated. The headlong rush across France also exacerbated deep-seated strategic disagreements within the Allied command. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, a military statesman rather than a warlord, sought consensus. But Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, recently promoted to Field Marshal, demanded a single, narrow thrust under his command through Belgium and Holland into the Ruhr. American generals, including Bradley and Patton, preferred a broader push east to the Saar. This fundamental dispute over the primary axis of advance created strategic paralysis and resource allocation disputes that would haunt the Allies in the coming months. On August 31, 1944, the British Guards Armoured Division seized Amiens and vital bridges over the Somme, driving a wedge between German armies. This further fueled the perception of a crumbling front. German Commander General der Panzertruppe Heinrich Eberbacht was caught completely unawares. The Canadian First Army pushed into Pas-de-Calais and captured Le Havre, while regiments like the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry and Essex Scottish, carrying the weight of the disastrous Dieppe raid, fought with renewed purpose. A powerful symbol of the Allied advance came with the march of the 28th Infantry Division through Paris, led by Major General Norman Deed Infantry Division. Cota, their red keystone badge, dubbed the Bloody Bucket by the Germans, was proudly displayed. Countless American jeeps, some bristling with .5 Sigru machine guns, scout cars, 155 mm, Long Tom, howitzers, M4 Sherman tanks, and tank destroyers rolled through the streets. General Bradley later remarked, "I don't think many people realized the men were marching from parade into battle. This procession was not merely celebration, it was a logistical display that contrasted sharply with the old-fashioned Wehrmacht of 1940. The dash continued. The rapturous Belgian reception, champagne, flowers, cheering crowds, girls, greeted Major General Pip Roberts' 11th Armoured Division as they captured Antwerp on September 4th at Evans, 1944. The 6,000-man German garrison was ignominiously marched to be held in empty zoo cages. General der Artillerie Walter Warlimont expressed German shock. "We had not expected any breakthrough so quickly, and nothing was ready." The city of Antwerp, Europe's second-largest port, was a crucial tactical victory. American light tanks, using ambush tactics, would block and hide knocked-out vehicles. Some tank crews had covered 563 miles with practically no maintenance. A pincer movement at the Mons Pocket trapped over 25,000 German soldiers, including 3 generals, with 6,100 taken prisoner. But the full strategic value of Antwerp was immediately compromised by the failure to secure its sea approaches, particularly the Scheldt estuary. Montgomery, preoccupied with his own advance, neglected to clear this vital waterway, believing the Canadians could handle it later. This oversight would prove immensely costly. Meanwhile, the German High Command, despite Hitler's desperate denial of reality, likened to a priest sprinkling pork with holy water and declaring it fish, attempted to stem the tide of disintegration. The LOXXRT's Army Corps War Diary painted a picture unworthy and disgraceful for the German army, with widespread desertion and disorder. Feldjägerstreifengruppen, military police punishment groups, were authorized to use weapons to round up stragglers. They were indoctrinated with lectures on the infallibility of the Führer. Keitel's order, on September 2nd, decreed the immediate execution of malingerers and shirkers. Hitler's inner circle, particularly the rivalry between Bormann Göring and Himmler, further undermined unified leadership. A security service report noted women's increasing desire for the war's end and a loss of faith in the Führer. The Allied supply crisis was escalating. The vast armies required 10,000 tons of supplies daily from Normandy. The Red Ball Express, a heroic effort involving 7,000 trucks, covered nearly 500 kilometers, consuming 300,000 gallons of fuel daily. Yet, 9,000 trucks were written off, a testament to the immense logistical strain. Patton, ever resourceful, liberated 50,000 cases of champagne and employed a shameless method of war, often pretending to reconnoiter simply to advance. Montgomery's perceived slight Eisenhower, reportedly calling him the greatest living soldier, without mention of others' achievements, further strained Anglo-American relations. The rapid advance, while exhilarating, created an illusion of impending victory, masking deep-seated Allied strategic disagreements and dangerously underestimating German resilience and tactical recovery. This false dawn of victory would lead to premature cancellations of military contracts and a shift in focus to the Pacific, ultimately prolonging the conflict in Europe. The heady days of rapid advance soon gave way to a stark realization. The Allied offensive was outrunning its supply lines and strategic coherence. The period after Normandy was marred by critical strategic blunders, overconfidence, and debilitating internal disunity. This would prolong the war and inflict unnecessary casualties. A prime example was Operation Market Garden, launched on September 17, 1944. This ambitious airborne operation, conceived in the wake of the swift advance, aimed to seize a series of bridges and cross the Rhine at Arnhem. It was, in hindsight, shockingly ill-planned, with a minimal chance of success. Its fatal flaw lay in its basic premise. Drop zones were too far from objectives, exposing airborne forces to immediate and intense German fire. The ground force XXX Corps was expected to charge a single road for 104 kilometers to relieve Arnhem, a route that quickly became known as Hell's Highway. Allied intelligence proved fatally flawed, underestimating German strength in the Arnhem area. Analysts mistakenly assumed the 9th and 10th SS Panzer divisions were too run down to pose a serious threat. The outcome was catastrophic. Only a single battalion of British paratroopers reached the Arnhem Bridge, trapped on its northern side. Total Allied losses exceeded 14,000 men. Market Garden's failure was a brutal lesson, exposing deep flaws in Allied strategy and the perils of overconfidence. Even as this costly failure unfolded, another critical logistical blunder was undermining the entire Allied effort. Despite explicit warnings from Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay about the strategic necessity of securing the Scheldt estuary and the port of Antwerp, Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, SAF, and particularly Field Marshal Montgomery ignored them. Montgomery instead insisted on clearing German garrisons in Boulogne, Calais, and Dunkirk, ports that would prove unnavigable for some time. This neglect had dire consequences. The vital port of Antwerp, captured on September 4th, remained unusable for months. The Battle of the Scheldt, a protracted and costly campaign, only commenced on October 2nd. It involved heavy fighting and inflicted 13,000 casualties on Canadian and British forces. The RAF even had to bomb dikes to flood Walcheren Island to assist its capture. It was not until November 28, 1944, 85 days after Antwerp itself was taken, that the first supply convoy finally entered the port. This delay profoundly hampered Allied resupply for the winter offensives. These strategic debates were compounded by severe personality clashes. Montgomery, accused of overwhelming egotism and manipulative ways, directly criticized Eisenhower's strategy to General George C. and Theus of Wright. Marshal in Eindhoven on October 8. Eisenhower, frustrated by Montgomery's insubordination, issued a powerful rebuttal, warning him to refer matters to higher authority if he felt directives endangered operations. Montgomery, for his part, conceded, "You will hear no more on the subject of command from me." Yet, the damage of earlier indecision was already done. As the Allies struggled with these strategic blunders, Hitler, from the Wolfskranzee, was already conceiving a desperate counterattack. His decision on September 16th to launch an offensive from the Ardennes, aiming for Antwerp, was a gamble to break the boundary between British and American forces. He He requested 1,500 fighter planes by November 1st and recalled Rundstedt as Commander-in-Chief West. 30 new Volksgrenadier divisions and new Panzer divisions were envisioned. Even within the German High Command, Guderian and OKH had serious doubts due to the dire situation on the Eastern Front. Simultaneously, the Allies faced tenacious German resistance along the Siegfried Line or West Wall. The battle for Aachen, Germany's first major city to fall, became a brutal symbol of this resistance. Hitler had ordered Aachen defended to the last stone, intended as an example to the Reich. This led to costly attritional battles, even as Nazi party officials, the Luftwaffe, and police fled east towards Cologne on September 11, 1944. General Lieutenant Gerhard Graf von Schwerin, commander of the 116th Panzer Division, dared to cancel an evacuation order and appealed for merciful treatment of civilians, an act of courage against Nazi directives. The Siegfried Line itself was a formidable barrier of dragon's teeth, concrete pyramids, bunkers, and trenches. Attacking it required specialized tactics, infiltration at night to bypass German mortar positions, assault teams of at least a dozen men using 155 mm self-propelled guns for penetration, tank destroyers targeting embrasures for concussion casuals. Explosives, including pole or satchel charges of at least 30 pounds of TNT, were needed to breach fortifications. Fragmentation and white phosphorus grenades were hurled down ventilation shafts. American soldiers would shout "Kamerad" and "Wir schießen nicht" to induce surrender. Tanks were used to blast the rear of bunkers or fill in holes with their dozers. Even small Leuchtturm box mines, just 2 inches across, posed a constant threat. The Allied advance, far from being unimpeded after D-Day, was suffering from critical strategic blunders and enduring tenacious German resistance. The failure of Operation Market Garden, the delayed opening of Antwerp, and the brutal battles along the Siegfried Line demonstrated that the path to victory was far from clear or easy. The war was prolonged, casualties mounted, and Allied cohesion was severely tested. This period profoundly challenged the myth of a seamless Seims, the part, unified march, and revealed Montgomery's overwhelming egotism as a significant impediment to Allied unity. Late autumn 1944. The initial optimism of a quick victory had evaporated, replaced by a grim reality of brutal attritional warfare. The prolonged closure of Antwerp's vital port had inadvertently bought Germany precious time for redeployment and strategic planning. Meanwhile, victory fever and the assumption of an early end to the war led American commanders in the Pacific to increase their strengths, unwittingly weakening Allied forces in Europe and creating critical shortages of ammunition and men. This period was characterized by intense urban combat, internal German decay, and the Allies' struggle to maintain strategic momentum against a determined, albeit crumbling, Nazi regime. The battle for Aachen, Germany's ancient imperial city, epitomized the ferocity of this new phase of war. The U.S. Ninth Army, taking over the left flank of Bradley's 12th Army Group, faced the 12th Volksgrenadier Division, recently arrived from the Eastern Front. American artillery barrages were so intense they dazed many an old combat soldier from the east. 19 Tactical Air Command bombed and strafed Aachen for 2 days starting October 11th. Aachen, with its pre-war population of 160,000 civilians, had seen attempts at evacuation, yet approximately 40,000 remained, trapped in the inferno. German troops under Oberst Gerhard Wilk transformed houses into reinforced concrete bunkers. His defending force was a desperate mix: Waffen-SS, Kriegsmarine sailors, and fortress battalions, bolstered by an SS battalion artillery of the 246th Infantry Division, the 219th Assault Gun Brigade, and combat engineers before encircled in tour cases. Major Hyman observed excellent troops, half of whom were naval personnel intended for the U-boat arm. Urban combat was a new, terrifying reality. It necessitated searching every room and closet of every building, and blowing up every sewer. M4 Shermans, outfitted with an extra .50 machine gun on the turret, crept through the streets, their crews shooting high-explosive shells into cellars before advancing. Fragmentation and white phosphorus grenades and flamethrowers were standard tools for clearing these subterranean strongholds. The tactic of mouse-holing, blasting through walls with bazookas or explosives, became essential. German Panzerfausts, though short-range, were terrifyingly effective, often causing enemy strongpoint crews to surrender, in most cases immediately. When blinded by dust, American commanders learned to insist on direct fire due to the unreliability of mortar and artillery fire in the chaotic urban environment, where mortar round fuses exploded as soon as they touched a roof. Oberst Wilkes' command post moved to an air raid shelter, as few assault guns which we had just received were immediately destroyed. The flattened condition of the buildings allowed physical contact between units, turning the city into a labyrinthine battlefield. House clearing became a grim routine, firing constantly at windows, then room-to-room searches with grenades and submachine guns. 155 mm self-propelled long toms were used at ranges as close as 150 meters, a single shell piercing 3 houses before exploding in and wrecking the 4th house. Civil holding pens guarded by MPs were set up, but a dire lack of trained interpreters and CIC personnel hampered screening efforts. On October 21st, Oberst Wilkes surrendered. He stated that the Führer's order to hold the town to the last applied to them just as much as to everyone else, but privately conceded Hitler was living in his own fantasy world. A former German soldier complained the civilian population behaved worse than the French, shouting abuse. Indeed, the desperation was palpable. German women, butchering a fallen horse in the street, or wheeling turnips in baby carriages. This brutal urban warfare was mirrored by the accelerating internal decay of Germany. Admiral Nikolaus Horthy's betrayal and switch of sides in Hungary, followed by the kidnapping of his son by Otto Skorzeny, highlighted the rapid collapse of the Axis alliance. Admiral Kreitper, the resigned Luftwaffe Chief of Staff, was deemed persona non grata, a defeatist. His diary entry on October 18th recorded fears in East Prussia, the first refugee treks to be seen. Horrible. Gumbinnen was on fire, with columns of refugees. Reports of atrocities from Nemmersdorf, where shot women and children have been nailed to barn doors, were ruthlessly exploited by Goebbels, playing up rape, looting and destruction by the Red Army. Yet German soldiers themselves were looting their own people, behaving like wild animals, blinding horses to slaughter and eat. Women cursed and yelled at soldiers. "Get out! We don't want to be shot to bits," calling them prolongers of the war. Cynicism festered. Hitler's promises of secret weapons were mocked, the V-1 missile dubbed Versager 1 or Failure 1. Goebbels' propaganda, claiming every German will fight, to the last man, and fabricating stories of American officers using riding whips on German women, often failed to resonate with a populace facing daily horrors. Internal Nazi power struggles raged behind Hitler's increasingly isolated facade. Göring extended his deer hunt at Rominten to watch Himmler and Bormann a little closer. Himmler sought squadrons to expand his SS. Bormann and Keitel acted as gatekeepers, controlling access to the Führer, with Keitel giving detailed instructions to generals before their crucial meetings. Reports of widespread looting by senior Nazi officials in France and Belgium, and Gauleiters amassing wealth, while company heads were rationed, further eroded faith. The civilian population endured unspeakable hardship. Travel by train was severely disrupted, with leave days spent simply waiting. Berlin citizens joked with gallows. Humor. What is cowardice? When someone in Berlin volunteers for the Eastern Front, the city reeked of gas, rubble, and sometimes even the stench of putrefying flesh. Skin diseases were common due to poor soap, overcrowding, and shortage of clothing. Venereal diseases spread partly from troops returning from occupied territories. An estimated 18,000 Wehrmacht deserters hid in Berlin's allotment huts, part of some 10,000 men executed by the Wehrmacht by year-end, their families threatened with most ruthless reprisals. The black market thrived, an English cigarette for 5 Reichsmarks, a Camel for 10 %, real coffee at 600 Reichsmarks per kilo, allegedly organized by the SS in Holland. A horrifying and bizarre conversation was recorded between 2 Kriegsmarine admirals, where Arthur Greiser boasted coffee cost him 32,000 Jewish women. A satirical song lamented rising prices and starvations. Contrasting with the supposed sympathy of those above, the narrative of unwavering German resolve was demonstrably false, replaced by a reality of widespread dissent, cynicism, and internal collapse. The Allied experience, though victorious, was not without its own challenges. The Germany First policy was slipping, leading to alarming shortages of ammunition and men. Paris, the Silver Foxhole or Pig Alley in Pigalle, saw almost 10,000 US soldiers per day on 72-hour passes. GIs offset expenses by buying cigarettes for 50 cents and selling them for $15.20. French authorities complained about US troops exploiting import duty and exchange control exemptions, luring women with cigarettes, tinned ham, and nylon stockings. This revealed the complex, often fraught reality of the war's final stages, far removed from simple narratives of liberation. As the battle for Aachen concluded, the United States Army turned its attention towards clearing the west bank of the Rhine. The decision to prioritize a Rhine crossing south of Cologne led to an advance through the Hürtgen forest, setting the stage for a costly and tragically underestimated new phase of the war. The Hürtgen forest was a semi-mountainous expanse of deep pine woods riven by ravines and narrow tracks. It was a terrain that General Courtney H. Hodges, commander of the First Army, insisted on attacking head-on, despite it being the most difficult approach. Hodges, a commander who seldom visited the front, had a reputation for dismissing officers, fostering a hierarchical fear that stifled dissent among his subordinates. This strategic inflexibility was a fatal flaw. The forest itself became a sinister fairy tale. Men conversed in whispers, feeling like intruders in its oppressive gloom. Initial forays by the 3rd Armored and 1st Infantry Divisions in September had revealed its treacherous nature. A German divisional commander expressed surprise that Americans were trying to fight through the wooded area, considering it out of the question. German staff knew it was easier to defend in the woods than in the open. The Hürtgen Forest campaign, which began in earnest in mid-September, would become a disastrous American offensive. It was characterized by strategic blunders, tactical inflexibility, and a profound underestimation of German defensive capabilities and ingenuity. The human cost would be immense, the gains minimal. The 9th Division, for example, suffered approximately 4,500 casualties, one for every yard it had advanced. The 28th Division, under the proud General Dutchcote, was tasked with an EMPT plan. In the Kull Ravine operation alone, they would suffer 5,684 casualties, with the 112th Infantry reduced to a mere 300 men. The campaign resulted in an astonishing 33,000 casualties out of 120,000 men deployed. The 4th Infantry Division alone sustained more than 5,000 battle casualties and over 2,500 non-battle losses. Ernest Hemingway famously described it as passion daily with tree bursts. Their mine warfare was sophisticated. Shoe, Regal, Teller and anti-tank mines were buried, some as many as 3 deep in the soft muddy roads. The Regal mine, very hard to remove as it was wired up to explode upon handling, was particularly insidious. They willingly called artillery fire on their own positions to stem American advances. Snipers, trained at Munsterlager with intense hate propaganda, lurked in the dense canopy. MG-42 machine guns, their fields of fire improved by cut lower branches, raked the forest floor. Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck, the German stovepipe anti-tank weapons, were devastating in close-quarters fighting. The physical and environmental challenges were relentless. Radios worked badly in the deep valleys, heavy moisture and dense pine woods, forcing reliance on signalers who became immediate targets. Constant rain, mud, and cold led to trench foot, a debilitating condition. A company commander lost 26 men to hospital in 10 days due to immersion foot. Alone, the buddy system for foot care was a desperate measure. American 4.2-inch mortars suffered wide dispersion of rounds due to cold, wet weather affecting their propellant. Sherman tanks, the backbone of American armored might, struggled on steep, muddy tracks, becoming vulnerable to mines and anti-tank weapons. Hodges, dismissing troop complaints about terrain and equipment failure as excuses, failed to grasp the strategic importance of the Schwammenau and Erft dams, a critical oversight that only became apparent too late. This dismissal directly challenged the widely held myth of German lack of guts and American invincibility. The Germans endured, fought with cunning, and capitalized on every American misstep. On October 16th, the 9th Division's advance ground to a halt due to mounting casualties. General de Vlieger Kreipe's diary entry from November 2nd as the 28th Infantry Division began its attack, reveals Göring's and Hitler's dismissal of any negotiated peace. On November 3rd, at dawn, the 112th Infantry began its advance down the Kaul River, unexpectedly leading to the capture of Schmidt. This seemed a rare success. However, Generalfeldmarschall Model, Commander-in-Chief of Army Group B, swiftly organized a counterattack. By dawn on November 4th, Schmidt was recaptured, decisively reversing American gains. Despite the mounting casualties and evident failures, American leadership continued to commit more divisions to this meat grinder. By November 12th, the British Second Army began an offensive east of Nijmegen, and the US 1st Division was ordered to the Hurtgen. On November 16th, the third major offensive into the forest began. The Hurtgen forest battle inflicted horrific physical and mental damage on both sides. It would become a psychological abyss, a stain on American military history, and inadvertently, a grim prelude to Hitler's final desperate gamble. As autumn turned to winter 1944, the Western Front became a landscape of brutal attritional struggle. The Hurtgen forest continued to devour men. A heavy snow, 2 feet or more, fell on the whole forest, compounding the misery of constant rain. Men suffered from hypothermia, trench foot, and frostbite. Combat exhaustion, the military euphemism for neuropsychiatric breakdown, spread rapidly. Many German officers believed the fighting here was worse than fighting in the First World War, or even on the Eastern Front. Hemingway's poignant description of Passchendaele, with tree bursts aptly captured the horror. Trees were smashed, shredded, gashed and sliced by shellfire. Bodies mangled by mines lay everywhere, burned-out carcasses of vehicles littered the woods. In just 3 days, the 22nd Infantry in the 4th Division suffered 391 battle casualties, including 28 officers and 110 NCOs. The 4th Infantry Division alone sustained more than 5,000 battle casualties and over 2,500 non-battle losses. Ultimately, the United States Army would suffer 33,000 casualties out of 120,000 men deployed in the Hurtgen forest. German soldiers, too, were found dead in their foxholes from sheer exhaustion. There were 8,000 cases of psychological collapse on the American side. Thanksgiving Day turkey dinners were frequently interrupted by German artillery fire, which perfected the tactic of time on target for the assault on Gay. For the assault preceding stakes of time on target for the assault on Gay, stirred, and particularly tree bursts, sending shell fragments screaming from the treetops in every direction. Away from the Hurtgen's gloom, General Patton, driven by a personal obsession, launched his Third Army against the ancient fortress city of Metz. A joke circulated on Armistice Day, which was also Patton's birthday, that the two are incompatible. The constant rain which had swollen the Moselle over its floodplain made river crossings a sodden nightmare. An engineer company endured 2 days of frustration and hard work to connect a pontoon bridge, only for a tank destroyer to snag a cable, causing the bridge to break loose and swing downstream. Patton related that the whole damn company sat down in the mud and bawled like babies. His aggressive leadership, while often successful, clashed with the grinding realities of terrain and weather. Further south, Allied advances brought symbolic victories. General Leclerc, recalling his promise at Kufra, flew the tricolour over Strasbourg Cathedral as the city was liberated. But even here, the retreat of German forces revealed decay. SS troops looted Strasbourg before withdrawal. Soldiers ordered to fight to the last round threw ammunition where Leclerc controlled them. General Major Vaterode scorned fleeing senior officers and Nazi party officials. Everyone ran away, Kreiliter, Ortsgruppenleiter, the municipal authorities, the mayor and the deputy mayor, they all took to their heels. General Lieutenant Schreiber arrived with about 10 wonderful brand new cars, with girls in them, staff auxiliaries, and overfed officials. This contradicted any myth of unwavering German resolve in retreat. Yet, strategic disagreements continued to plague the Allies. General de Lattre de Tassigny complained of insufficient supplies for his First French Army. De Gaulle, seeking to project a purely French image, even desired to withdraw colonial forces to make the First Army appear more ethnically French. Crucially, Eisenhower rejected General Devers's plan to cross the Rhine at Rastatt, prioritizing the Ruhr and Berlin. This decision would expose a strategic blind spot that Hitler was about to exploit. For, even as these brutal battles raged, Hitler from his Sonderzug, or special train, with its flak wagon and armoured coaches, was meticulously crafting his last desperate gamble. His decision for a counterattack from the Ardennes was conceived when bedridden in the second week of September at the Wolfsarnsees, amidst nervousness about a polyp removal from his vocal cords. He deliberately avoided seeing Berlin's wounds from Allied bombing. General Oberst Jodl made a rough sketch on a map, showing the direction of attack and required forces. The code word for this secret study, Wacht am Rhein, or Watch on the Rhine, Hitler desired to attack south of Liège, supported by 2,000 aircraft, an exaggerated figure. The planned breakthrough by the 6th Panzer Army was to occur just south of the Hürtgen forest. Secrecy was paramount. Individuals signed a pledge of execution if they revealed the plan. Generalfeldmarschall Rundstedt, Commander-in-Chief West, received no information at all about the offensive's planning, underscoring that this was Hitler's plan, not Rundstedt's. Logistical realities were ignored. General Hasso von Manteuffel requested fuel for 500 kilometers, but received only enough for 150 kilometers, Keitel reportedly holding back fuel on principle to prevent commanders from being too extravagant. Waffen-SS divisions received priority for new equipment and reinforcements, feeding existing rivalries within the Wehrmacht. This late autumn of 1944, therefore, was a crucible. It revealed the immense human cost of attritional warfare, the strategic inflexibility of Hitler, and a dangerous disconnect between Allied High Command's grand vision and the grim reality on the battlefield. It was a time of brutal struggle, laying the groundwork for the ultimate German gamble. December 1944, a profound chill had settled over the Western Front, both literally and figuratively. Beneath the deceptively quiet, snow-covered forests of the Ardennes, Hitler's last, desperate gamble was taking shape. Codenamed Herbstennebel, or Autumn Mist, and initially Wacht am Rhein. It was an offensive born of delusion and doomed by flawed strategic planning, underestimation of Allied capabilities, and severe logistical shortcomings. Hitler's insistence on absolute secrecy was paramount, but crippling. It led to delayed troop briefings, inadequate lack of reconnaissance, movement controls were extreme. Night marches, daylight billeting in barns, no fires, and charcoal for cooking to minimize smoke. A fake headquarters north of Aachen, and a fake 25th Army were established. General Manteuffel deliberately spread a rumor about attacking the Saar area. Strict radio silence meant signals nets could not be established until the opening bombardment. The Gestapo even conducted security checks, and Volksgrenadier divisions were ordered to carry paybooks and identity documents, so deserters could be shot as spies. This extreme secrecy, driven by Hitler's increasingly erratic moods and physical deterioration, was a double-edged sword. It achieved tactical surprise, but undermined operational effectiveness. General Feldmarschall Model, commander of Army Group B, expressed a grim fatalism, calling it the last gamble. He candidly assessed the operations as the worst prepared German offensive of this war, giving it not more than a 10% chance of success. On December 2nd, at a planning conference in Berlin, Hitler dictated his Antwerp plan, overruling experienced commanders like Rundstedt. His final orders bore the chilling directive, not to be altered. Yet, even within the ranks, German officers harbored serious doubts. Manteuffel privately determined his final objective would be the Meuse, despite Hitler's insistence on Brussels. He keenly understood that Allied reactionability would be the cardinal factor. He also noted that Dietrich's 6th Panzer Army, with its 120,000 men, nearly 500 tanks, and 1,000 artillery pieces, was not commanded as one formation. The offensive laid bare deep-seated tensions and rivalries between the regular Wehrmacht and the Waffen-SS. SS Oberstgruppenführer Sepp Dietrich, commander of the 6th Panzer Army, was widely considered a bad joke by senior army officers. His generalship was questionable, his attitude dismissive. He allegedly snapped, Objectives, objectives. If I had to give everybody objectives, wherever should I be?" Oberstleutnant von der Hayti, tasked with a parachute drop, scathingly called Dietrich a conceited, reckless military leader with the knowledge and ability of a good sergeant. He has no moral scruples. General Warnemont observed that the SS no longer considered itself a member of the Wehrmacht, but had its own organization. Operation Grief, led by Otto Skorzeny, was a clandestine effort to create mayhem behind Allied lines. Hitler had personally briefed Skorzeny on October 21st for his most important assignment. Skorzeny, described as a typical evil Nazi and real dirty dog, was tasked with infiltrating English-speaking Germans in captured American uniforms. But even this audacious plan was hampered by reality. Difficulties in obtaining sufficient uniforms, especially U.S. Army winter clothing, and a mixture of M4 Shermans and badly disguised Panthers for the 150th Panzer Brigade. The airborne component was equally ill-fated. On December 8th, General Oberst Kurt Student briefed von der Hayti on the parachute attack. Of the 112 Junkers 52 transports, half the pilots lacked proper training for night drops, formation flying, or operating over enemy territory. Only 2 pilots were old Stalingrad flyers. Haiti's force of approximately 1,200 men faced overwhelming odds, further highlighting the impracticality of the entire offensive. Logistical failures were endemic. The concentration of forces required 1,050 trains, with each Panzer division alone needing 70 trains. Fuel shortages were severe, Manteuffel receiving only enough for 150 kilometers, far short of the 500 he requested. This demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of operational realities at the highest levels. By December 11th, Joachim Peiper, the ruthless SS commander, guessed the offensive was coming due to the artillery concentrations. On the evening of December 15th, officers were finally allowed to brief their troops. At dawn on December 16th, ex-day for the Ardennes offensive, the Herbstnebel would descend. This desperate gamble, a significant drain on Germany's dwindling resources, was a testament to a regime's fanaticism. It exposed the deep fissures within the German military hierarchy and challenged any myth of a well-prepared, unified German command. The offensive was, at its heart, an improvised act of will, doomed to fail. For weeks, the intelligence picture for the Allied High Command had been a patchwork of conflicting signals and dismissed warnings. Despite fragmented indicators, a pervasive overconfidence and deep-seated disagreements among Allied leadership resulted in a catastrophic failure to anticipate the scale, indeed the very possibility, of a major German offensive through the Ardennes. Inter-Allied command strife had been persistent. Field Marshals Sir Alan Brooke and Montgomery expressed deep concern over the slow Allied advance, advocating for a single ground force commander, ideally Montgomery. This created intense friction for General Dwight D. AISA, Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander. Eisenhower, facing insubordination, had to manage constant strategic challenges. General Omar Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group, was ill with flu and hives, exasperated by German resistance and the slow Allied progress. His aide, Major Chester B. Hanson, recorded the immense stress and fatigue of command in his diary. A prevailing belief had taken hold. Germany, in its weakened state, and facing Soviet pressure on the Eastern Front, lacked the capacity for a significant strategic offensive, especially one through the historically difficult terrain of the Ardennes. This assumption, a dangerous filter, caused senior Allied officers to discard intelligence that contradicted their narrative. As early as the first week of November, a German deserter had reported panzer divisions redeploying to Westphalia. SAF's heavy reliance on ultra-intelligence, so critical throughout the war, became a vulnerability. The Germans, under Hitler's strict secrecy orders, maintained total radio silence, effectively blinding ultra. Other intelligence streams, like reports from captured German officers detailing 46 divisions for a planned offensive, were dismissed as optimistic rumors. Such numbers, even if inflated, should have triggered greater alarm. Reports of Luftwaffe preparations, with fighter aircraft re-equipped as fighter bombers and units ordered not to use badges, were similarly overlooked or misinterpreted. The Germans even employed a find-the-lady tactic, shuffling formations to confuse Allied intelligence. The Ardennes sector was designated low priority for air reconnaissance. Bad weather further limited missions. Colonel BAA, Notre Corps, Sile de C. Dixon, the G2 at U.S. First Army, was a controversial intelligence officer who increasingly pinpointed the Ardennes as the likely attack sector. On December 10th, his report noted panzer concentrations in the Eifel. By December 14th, he received a debriefing from a woman reporting troop concentrations in the Eifel. Yet, on December 15th, Dixon was told to take leave. Bradley, at a press conference that day, estimated German tank strength at only 600 to 700 tanks. A Shaef briefing noted, "Nothing from Ardennes." Just hours before the attack, on December 15th, Montgomery, remarkably, declared that German offensive action was precluded by resource shortages. This deep miscalculation exemplified the prevailing Allied mindset. General Patton, meanwhile, was actively campaigning for good weather, ringing his Third Army chaplain on December the 8th to pray for clear skies, unaware of the storm brewing. The Luxembourg, Switzerland, the seemingly peaceful and least likely sector for attack, was lightly held. The 4th and 28th Infantry Divisions were there, resting. The 106th Infantry Division, comprising ill-equipped replacements, some still wearing neckties and lacking stoves, were particularly vulnerable. They would soon suffer from trench foot, while experienced troops, with their personal stoves, fared better. 8 Corps headquarters in Bastogne, just 6 days before the attack, concluded that the enemy was bringing new divisions in for experience, indicating a desire for a quiet sector. Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi Minister of Propaganda, had been preparing the ideological ground using the slogan, "Victory or Siberia," to deter surrenders, that the true nature of the coming storm was about to be revealed. At 5:20 hours on December 16th, Sepp Dietrich's 6th Panzer Army artillery opened fire. The illusion of German weakness and Allied security shattered in a thunderous barrage. The Ardennes offensive, Germany's last major offensive on the Western Front, had begun. It exposed the critical importance of integrated intelligence, the dangers of filtering information through assumption, and the often fraught nature of Allied command. December 16th, to they mark it, 5:15 hours. In the pre-dawn darkness of the Ardennes, Lieutenant Matt Connop was awakened by loud explosions. The silence had been shattered. The German offensive, Herbstnebel, had begun. This audacious thrust, while achieving tactical surprise, would ultimately be hampered by flawed strategic planning, underestimation of American resilience, and unexpected logistical challenges. General Hasso von Manteuffel, commander of the 5th Panzer Army, had conducted reconnaissance in disguise of the River Our and River Sauer, noting the Sauer as a significant obstacle. He had questioned soldiers about Army's evening habits, leading to a plan for a stealthy nighttime river crossing, disregarding Hitler's insistence on a prolonged opening bombardment. Hitler, relying on a World War I concept, had prescribed that infantry divisions would make the breakthrough to preserve panzer divisions, a directive that would create bottlenecks and delay momentum. The German advance began at 6 o'clock, but almost immediately it encountered tenacious American resistance. In the hamlet of Lanzerath, strategically located near the Losheim Gap, a single 18-man reconnaissance platoon from the 394th Regiment of the 99th Division, under Lieutenant Lyle J. Buck Jr., displayed supreme valor. Their obduracy held off a German regiment for a day, inflicting over 400 paratroopers killed and wounded. This small unit, barely noticed in the initial chaos, inflicted significant casualties and critically delayed Kampfgruppe Piper. The myth of a seamless, unstoppable German wave was immediately challenged. Piper's Kampfgruppe, comprising the notorious 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitler Jugend, described as Boy Scout types by some, was almost 25 kilometers long, a logistical challenge on narrow, icy roads. They were delayed by a blown bridge that had not been repaired. Piper impetuously ordered his tanks to drive through an American minefield, disabling 5 panzers. His flak panzers, equipped with quadruple 20mm guns, were capable of obliterating unprotected defenders, but even this firepower could not overcome the terrain and American resolve. The American 14th Cavalry Group, strung out in isolated positions across a front of nearly 9 kilometers, found a gap nearly 2 kilometers wide between Roth and Weckerath. Their unexpected retreat created a critical gap, exposing the 99th and 106th Divisions and allowing German forces to bypass front lines. The 106th Infantry Division, positioned in the Schnee-Eifel, would be shattered over the next 3 days. The 5th Panzer Army, aiming for St. Panzer Army, aiming for St. Minnes, with 15 kilometers to the rear. did not reach its objectives on the first day. The 26th Volksgrenadier Division lost 230 men and 8 officers. In Hoffen, the American battalion inflicted terrific losses on the 326th Volksgrenadier Division. American use of 155 Long Tom's artillery proved devastating. German infantry, some of whom had imbibed rather freely of alcoholic beverage, were often used as cannon fodder, suffering heavy casualties. The difficult Ardennes terrain, compounded by atrocious weather, nullified German advantages in tanks and air power. Observation was poor, and communication issues hampered artillery support. German forces, using artificial moonlight by bouncing searchlight beams off low clouds, sometimes silhouetted American positions, but this could also work to their detriment. The 28th Division, though outflanked, displayed tenacious defense. Their training of officers and NCOs as forward observers for the artillery proved crucial. They used 57 anti-tank guns to smash the walls of houses occupied by Germans, and white phosphorus grenades to flush them out. German intercept groups tried to sow confusion, playing records at full volume on the wavelengths which the Americans used, and taunting defenders in English over captured SER 536 radios. Civilians fled, hay barns alight, and destroyed farmhouses. 5 civilians, including 3 small children, died in Manderfeld. One harrowing account describes a soldier who exploded a grenade in his hand. Waldenberg's 116th Panzer Division attacked on the boundary between the 106th and 28th Divisions. The Panzer Lehr Division aimed for Bastogne, less than 30 kilometers to the west. The stubborn defense of Hosingen lasted until the second day. The 5th Fallschirmjäger Division, a last-minute replacement, comprised many soldiers who were 16 or 17 years old. Major Frank recounted his company taking Fruen, suffering heavy losses while waiting for non-existent artillery support. His troops floundered across the River Our, which was fast-flowing and had a muddy bottom. This initial German thrust, while achieving a stunning surprise, was no seamless, unstoppable wave. It was characterized by significant delays, logistical nightmares, and unexpected pockets of fierce American resistance. American troops, despite being unprepared, exhibited supreme valor, fighting with extraordinary courage. The offensive's failure to translate surprise into paralyzing shock offered a crucial early indication that Hitler's desperate gamble would not be the swift, decisive blow he envisioned. The initial German offensive, launched with calculated surprise, succeeded in tearing through American lines, but this breakthrough, while exposing critical American intelligence and communication failures, would ultimately falter. It was a consequence of logistical shortcomings, poor execution, and the unwavering resilience of underprepared American units, who, despite initial disarray, began to organize a defense that would ultimately stem the tide. The 212th Volksgrenadier Division, a spearhead of the German thrust, successfully pushed back the American 9th Armored Division. German patrols, utilizing the dense terrain and misty conditions, slipped through American outposts on bluffs and ridges, their voices, with heavy accents, announcing, "We are here," over captured field telephone lines. The Losheim Gap emerged as the most threatening German penetration point. Piper's Kampfgruppe, following a route chosen by the Führer himself, stretched almost 25 kilometers along narrow roads, a vivid illustration of the logistical challenge. Their objective, American fuel dumps at Bullingen, Stavelot, and the immense 2 million-gallon reserve at Francorchamps. The brutality of their advance was stark. German tanks were observed ironing foxholes, collapsing trenches with their tracks. Yet, even in the initial chaos, American units held their ground. The 4th Infantry Division, despite its manpower and weaponry shortages after the Hürtgen Forest, defended a 3-kilometer sector with tenacity. Their Skyline Drive, a series of 5 key towns and villages, became a crucial defensive line. They rapidly created abattis barriers, dropping tall pines across roads, booby-trapped and mined and deployed captured Panzerfausts, which, despite a short range of 40 meters, proved effective against Panther tanks. General Barton of the 4th Infantry Division learned of the full strength of the attack only at 11 o'clock hours, a testament to the surprise achieved. In the midst of this unfolding crisis, Eisenhower, who had just received his 5th star, desired to sign documents as General of the Army. But all pomp was immediately forgotten. Major General Kenneth Strong, Eisenhower's senior intelligence officer, upon hearing the news, immediately called for a map of the 8-corps sector. Eisenhower's reaction was swift and decisive. He immediately ordered the 7th Armored Division to support Troy Middleton in the Ardennes and Patton's 10th Armored Division to transfer. Patton, ever dramatic, reacted bitterly, comparing the attack to Ludendorff's offensive of March 25, 1918. But Lieutenant General Simpson, the doughboy general, agreed to release the 7th Armored Division. This was not a mere spoiling attack, as Bradley initially misjudged. Eisenhower recognized the magnitude of the threat. General Robertson of the 2nd Infantry Division alerted troops for a last-ditch defense around his command post, even forming an improvised defense platoon of cooks, clerks, and drivers, armed with bazookas and .50 caliber machine guns. General Gero of V Corps sensed the importance of holding the northern shoulder and the Lanzerath Ridge, a vital choke point. The 1st Division, the Big Red One, was ordered to prepare to move, soldiers gathering combat gear and climbing onto trucks, to the sounds of screaming memies and the ripping noise of German automatic weapons. General Bradley, defiant, refused to move his 12th Army Group headquarters, citing prestige. But the critical decision for Bastogne, the hub of the central Ardennes, was made. Orders were issued for the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, the elite of American forces, to move there rapidly. Meanwhile, the 106th Division faced an even worse situation, with 2 regiments almost surrounded in the Schnee-Eifel. Colonel Mark Devine of the 14th Cavalry Group warned of pulling back, his counterattack having failed. Brigadier General Bruce C. Clark arrived at St. Vith at 10:30 hours on December 17th, ready to organize a desperate defense. Brigadier General Bruce C. Clark arrived at St. Vith at 10:30 hours on December 17th, ready to organize a desperate defense. Yet the German offensive was not just a ground assault. Oberstleutnant von der Heyde was woken by a telephone call. His Kampfgrupp's jump was imminent. The Luftwaffe initially estimated a wind speed of 20 kmh over the drop zone, a figure deliberately misleading Heyde. A meteorologist later corrected this to a treacherous 58 km, noting the severe risk for a night drop in a wooded area. Elderly Junkers 52 transport planes, relics of earlier campaigns, were used for the airborne operation. Due to pilot error, approximately 200 of Heyde's men were dropped around Bonn, far from their objective. Only 10 aircraft managed to drop paratroopers on the designated drop zone, marked by 2 magnesium flares. Heyde assembled only 150 men, calling it a pitifully small muster. They recovered only 8 Panzerfausts out of 500 and just 181 mm mortar. Meanwhile, the German High Command projected an image of unwavering resolve. Adolf Hitler's message to the nation rang out. "There is victory at the end of the road." Generalfeldmarschal Model declared, "We will win, because we believe in Adolf Hitler and the Greater German Reich." This propaganda contrasted sharply with the grim realities on the German home front, where an Allied bombing raid on Magdeburg killed 4,000 German civilians. On the battle lines, Piper's Kampfgruppe was allotted the decisive role in the offensive. Piper made a tactical decision to use armored elements, Panthers and Mark IV tanks followed by the heavier Tiger tanks. He had test-driven a Panther over 80 kilometers before the offensive, an exercise in confidence. But the Panzer's fuel consumption in this terrain was more than twice what Keitel and the OKW had estimated. 2 trainloads of fuel failed to arrive, a critical logistical flaw. The SS Sicherheitsdienst (SD) security service followed Waffen-SS formations, foreshadowing grim events. Piper's Kampfgruppe launched an attack on Honsfeld before dawn on December 17th. The Kampfgruppe lost 2 Mark V Panthers at Honsfeld. 19 American prisoners were executed by Piper's SS Panzergrenadiers at Honsfeld. Piper decided to leave most trucks in Honsfeld, bogged down by the mud. The 9th Fallschirmjäger Regiment was tasked with mopping up and securing the area at Honsfeld. Piper pushed north to Bullingen, aiming to capture the American 2nd Division's fuel dump. Bullingen was taken unopposed soon after 8:30 hours on Sunday morning. 12 American light aircraft were destroyed there. A civilian wearing a swastika armband greeted the SS soldiers at Bullingen. A Kopfschuss, a pistol shot through the head at close range, was used to finish off a wounded soldier at Bullingen. 50 American prisoners were reportedly shot at Bullingen, according to the American official history. Company B of the 254th Engineer Battalion was overrun by German tanks west of Bullingen. On the American side, Lieutenant Matt Connop of the 2nd Infantry Division headquarters received a frantic report, paratroopers landing south of Eupen and 30 German tanks breaking through. General Robertson instructed Connop to alert everybody. Get every gun, man, and whatever you can get to prepare a last-ditch defense of the common PO's teens. He ordered. An improvised defense platoon was assembled, including cooks, clerks, and drivers. They were armed with bazookas and 257mm anti-tank guns. A military police officer arrived with 20 men, armed only with pistols. These ill-equipped defenders were quickly dubbed snowdrops. Anti-aircraft half-tracks fired at V1 buzz bombs, adding to the surreal chaos. The 26th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Division reached Camp Elsenborn on the ridge at 9 o'clock hours. They immediately skirmished with an advance patrol of paratroopers from the 3rd Fallschirmjägers Reconnaissance Battalion. Snow around the road junction had been churned into a yellowish mixture of snow and dirt from recent heavy shelling. The human cost was immediate and brutal. Erna Collars, a 16-year-old girl, was forced to show the way to a farm, and later found riddled with bullets. Yet a Gefreiter in the 3rd Panzergrenadier Division still wrote about the war, turning, and the hope of returning home. Far from the front, confusion and paranoia mounted. Escorts of machine gun-mounted jeeps waited for General Bradley in Verdun due to reports of German paratroopers. German divisions were less than 30 kilometers north of General Bradley's headquarters. Luxembourg was dubbed the last air raid shelter in Europe. Bradley's headquarters, known as Eagle Tack, became a hub of frantic activity. "Pardon my French, but where in hell has this son of a bitch gotten all his strength?" Bradley exclaimed, staring at the situation map. Captured German instructions, though piecemeal, provided some clarity at Seyf. Major General Strong used a German ceremonial sword to point at Bastogne on a map, highlighting its sudden importance. Hades paratroopers, it turned out, had dropped over 100 kilometers to the north of Bradley's headquarters. Hades' men now hid in the forest, setting up standing patrols to ambush jeeps and messengers. But with no carrier pigeons, Hades could not pass intelligence back. Back at the front, the crisis deepened. The 99th Division was battered east of Rocherath-Krinkelt. The 106th Division was attacked by the 18th and 62nd Volksgrenadier Divisions. Major General Alan W. Jones, commander of the 106th, was in a school in Saint-Assiers, Vith, his command post, a rapidly shrinking island of order. The 14th Cavalry's position on the north flank was breached. Colonel Devine attempted to counterattack with the 32nd Cavalry Squadron. Only a single cavalry troop remained in the valley of the River Our. Jones's last reserve battalion became lost in the dark. The 62nd Volksgrenadier Division forced the 424th back towards Winterspelt and the River Our. Brigadier General Bruce C. Clark, a great bear of a man, continued to organize the desperate defense. Demands for resupply by airdrop poured in from the two regiments in the Schnee-Eifel, now almost completely cut off. Colonel Devine reported German tanks just behind him. Another SS Kampfgruppe broke through 10 kilometers to the north of Devine, threatening to envelop what remained of the American line. The bitter cold became a weapon in itself, freezing sea rations solid for American soldiers. One paratrooper described cutting chunks of frozen hash one by one to thaw them out in his mouth. The extreme frost wasn't just an American challenge. German soldiers, too, resorted to desperate measures. Some were observed urinating on their machine guns to unfreeze the mechanism, a crude attempt to keep fighting. As German tanks pressed their advantage, American artillerymen, with their snub-barreled howitzers, were forced to engage panzers over open sights, a dangerous and desperate tactic. Sergeant Sky Jackson, a beacon of defiance, knocked out several tanks with his bazooka, inspiring those around him. Another bazooka man in the heat of battle forgot to arm his round, resulting only in a loud clang as it bounced off a tiger. The 15th Panzergrenadier Division, far weaker than intelligence had suggested, was largely just a Kampfgruppe under Oberstleutnant Wolfgang Mau. Yet, this depleted force still held immense destructive power. Kampfgruppe Mauk steamrolled the positions of the 401st Glider Infantry, pushing deeper into the American lines. The village of Champs was taken, lost, and retaken in furious fighting, a testament to the brutal seesaw battle. American paratroopers, drawing on their intensive training, were skilled at strip-ping and repairing weapons under fire and in the dark. The grim reality of the battle extended to civilians. In one instance, a 14-year-old girl, Liliane Delhomme, witnessed a German soldier smash the glass door of the Café Grégoire with his fist, cutting himself badly in the process, a raw display of desperation. As Christmas Eve dawned, a fragile hope emerged. German soldiers, for a brief moment, were observed in Foy, packed into houses and farms to get warm. One quietly expressed a desire to go home alive after 3 brothers had already been killed, a poignant whisper amidst the war. American soldiers, huddled in their own cold positions, could sometimes hear their enemies sing Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. Such moments evoked distant thoughts of Christmas at home, a world away from the frozen front. In Boisselles, a German soldier, buoyed by their perceived success, declared, "Tomorrow we will cross the Meuse." But not all German soldiers shared this confidence. Many were famished, if not starving, their rations dwindling. One was seen begging for food on his knees, a stark image of desperate hunger. Others were desperate to find drink in the parched landscape. The bridge leading to Rolly, crucial for retreat or advance, had its firing mechanism failed due to extreme frost, a silent casualty of the weather. An improvised defense platoon formed by every signaller, driver, and cook in the chateau showed the desperate measures taken to hold the line. Corporal Willis Fowler, with extraordinary courage, manned a machine gun and destroyed a whole company of grenadiers, a singular act of heroism. The short-lived silence of Christmas night was shattered. A Luftwaffe bomber flew over the town, dropping magnesium flares, followed by waves of Junkers 88, heralding renewed aerial assault. McAuliffe's headquarters was hit, causing buildings to vibrate and terrifying people with the threat of falling masonry. Bastogne itself had no anti-aircraft defences, because the quadruple .500 half-tracks were all deployed to bolster the perimeter defences. The 10th Armoured Aid Station tragically collapsed under the bombardment. Nurse Renée Lemaire and 25 of the seriously wounded were killed, burned to death in their beds. The German offensive was planned to break into Bastogne itself within 5 hours. On Christmas Day, at 5 o'clock, the first German assault began near Champs. Civilians in a chapel packed with people sang Silent Night, surrendering themselves to God's hand and reciting the rosary for comfort. Near Elsenborn, a 5-year-old girl, Elfriede Gromsfeld, was killed by shrapnel from a German shell on Christmas Day, a brutal reminder of civilian suffering. At 9 o'clock on Christmas Day, a new sound filled the air. American fighter bombers appeared over German ranks, a welcome sight for the Allies. The warning cry of Jabus was heard in German ranks, signalling the arrival of flying artillery. At 10 o'clock, success seemed very close for German forces near Senonchamps, but the air support, often described as a swarm of wasps over St. Vith, began to turn the tide. In the Christmas Day afternoon, the 15th Panzergrenadier Division reported it hardly had a battle-worthy tank left. Its offensive power spent. Combat Command B of the 2nd Armoured Division entered cells, signifying a strategic advance. The 2nd Panzer's famished and exhausted troops were now short of ammunition and out of fuel in cells, their advance grinding to a halt. Around cells, 82 armoured fighting vehicles and 82 artillery pieces were captured or destroyed. General Feldmarschall von Rundstedt, facing undeniable facts, informed Hitler that the offensive had failed. Patton, ever one for a dramatic flourish, showed off his headquarters lights with bulbs hanging in captured German helmets acting as lampshades. His diary entry from this clear, cold Christmas captured his brutal candor. He noted it was lovely weather for killing Germans, which seems a bit queer, seeing whose birthday it is. The arrival of the 17th Airborne Division and the newly arrived 11th Armoured Division signaled fresh Allied strength. B-26 bombers flattened St. Vith in a devastating tactic known as putting the city in the street. General Bradley flew to St. Trond, determined to act. His mission: to push Montgomery into launching an immediate counter-offensive. Montgomery, however, reiterating his desire for single command of ground forces, presented a familiar obstacle to unified action. Collins's 7th Corps was instructed to fall back in the west as far north as Ardennes on the Meuse. a strategic adjustment in the face of ongoing pressure. Refugees and local families, compelled by Christian charity, fed hungry German soldiers, illustrating the complex human interactions of war. Other local families made galettes and hot chocolate. For American soldiers, a small gesture of comfort amidst the chaos. An American soldier witnessing a girl who had lost her boots forced a German prisoner at gunpoint to give his boots to her. The act of compassion, though born of duress, resulted in frostbitten feet for the American soldier, a harsh personal cost. The battle continued to rage in places like Lutrebor, 6 kilometers south of Bastogne, where desperate fighting continued. Asena was shaking from explosions, a continuous barrage of war. The Château de Roumont, near the highway to Marseille, became a temporary stronghold. American artillery batteries took up position in Haid and Cheveton. Buissonville, a dozen kilometers east of the Koschenhausen Kampfgruppe, was another point of contention. The farm of La Happe was seized and lost. The Koschenhausen Kampfgruppe was spread thin across Conchaux and Cels. Foy Notre Dame, initially held by the Germans, was eventually retaken that afternoon, marking a small victory. Mannheim and Grandmesnil, meanwhile, remained areas of concern, where the 2nd SS Das Reich caused considerable anxiety. East of Marche, the 116th Panzer was ordered to break through, but their advance was effectively stalled. The Elsenborn Ridge, a key defensive position, held firm. St. Vith, devastated by bombing, stood as a testament to the destructive power unleashed. The German strategy stretched beyond conventional military advances. Otto Skorzeny, the renowned commando leader, represented this audacity. His Eisenhower Aktion aimed to capture or assassinate Allied leaders. It was designed to sow deep chaos behind the front lines. Allied intelligence even noted a potential Norway scare ruse linked to Skorzeny. Meanwhile, elite units like Kampfgruppe Piper spearheaded the offensive. The 1st SS Panzer, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, and 12th SS Panzer Hitlerjugend pushed hard. Their brutal actions provoked shock, even among German prisoners. These POIs condemned the utter madness of the SS units. Intense fighting consumed towns like Stavelot, Staumont, Troy-Ponce, Vilsamp. Allied maps starkly displayed the destruction of the 106th Division, but crucial insights were quietly emerging from Ultra intercepts. This intelligence, derived from code-breaking, clarified German intentions. AEF's deliberate exaggeration of the Ardennes crisis. General Eisenhower navigated complex Allied leadership. His psychopath assessment of General Montgomery revealed deep personal animosity. ACM Sir Arthur Tedder, Deputy Supreme Commander, felt the weight of these tensions. Jet Gen Carl II ATBs, Spats, directed the US under script, Army Air Forces, awaiting clear weather. Belliate Gen William H. Simpson of the US 9th Army commanded key defensive actions. A pivotal meeting took place on December 21, 1944, de Parc, involving General Patton. Patton, celebrated for his aggressive tactics, was already planning a counterstroke. His fastidious attention to military appearance was legendary, as seen in his necktie anecdote. He would later reflect on the destruction, composing a verse about Haufelies. The strategically vital crossroads of Bastogne became the primary German objective. Bajen Maxwell D. Taylor, famously led the 101st Airborne Division in its defense. Bayerlein's proposal to concentrate on Bastogne underscored its importance for the Germans. The psychological toll on leaders was immense. General Hodges's collapse and recovery illustrated the strain of command. Divine's agitated state and erratic command offered another example of this pressure. Some controversial ideas emerged within Allied high command discussions. Horrocks' controversial suggestion to let Germans cross the Meuse was one such debate point. The chilling prospect of V weapons loomed, potentially employed decisively by Hitler. A very real fear of a German gas attack added to the pervasive dread. The broader Ardennes offensive continued its relentless, bloody grind. General Major von Waldenberg, commander of the 116th Panzer, pondered the Allied counterattack timing. He, among others, perceived an American intelligence weakness, as Astus Hansen's remark, custom, highlighted. Within German units, the National Socialist Leadership Officer, NSFO, Article Control, the human and societal costs of the war were starkly apparent. The *VD rate in Europe had doubled during the year. A significant portion of French infections originated in Paris. Collaboration horizontale with French women created lasting social scars. The cinema bombing in Antwerp, Esterbik tragically claimed nearly 300 British and Canadian soldier lives. Hundreds more, including civilians, were gravely wounded. In a moment of surreal paradox, Bing Crosby, singing White Christmas, echoed in a German hospital train. This was a strange, poignant experience for a captured American POW. Allied intelligence meticulously continued its work. CSDI secretly recording POW conversations provided valuable, covert insights. Vissarionovich Stalin from the Soviet Union. Observed the Western Front's crisis. The formidable Siegfried Line, West Wall Zastifistin. But by January 8/9, 1945, the strategic picture was shifting. Ultra intercepts definitively indicated a German withdrawal. Areas around Rochefort, Marquet and the Bastogne pocket were being relinquished. The initial German objectives, like reaching Verdun or Strasbourg, had failed. Genob Kurt Student, Germany's airborne forces, commander saw his hopes diminish. Gen. D. Art Walter Wallimont, a senior German official, witnessed the strategic unraveling. Major General Whiteley, at SHCF diligently handled communications with the War Office. The dream of a decisive breakthrough to Versailles for Hitler was now a shattered illusion.